Here I am, fresh off of a mid-20s crisis. Hi Beats, it's EKG. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I have my monthly wrap up where I will be talking about all of the books I read in both January and February. So if you would like to learn more about what I read, you can just keep on watching. I have been having a fantastic start of my reading year in 2021. I read so many bangers, so many 5-star books that I keep thinking about, and probably read some of my all-time favorite books so far. So let's get into it. First, I want to start off with On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. And when I say this book is it's just everything to me. I stan Ocean Vuong to the end of time. This is another example of a book that I loved from him. I also read his poetry collection, Night Sky with Exit Wound, which was everything that I could ever hope and dream for in a poetry collection. But On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous is following a fictional character, Little Dog, who is a Vietnamese first-generation immigrant. So his mother and grandmother came from Vietnam during the Vietnam War. They settled in Connecticut, and Ocean Vuong writes Little Dog's experience and his path of self-discovery through identity, politics, the effects of war on groups of people and families. There's LGBTQ representation in this book, and it's written beautifully. It's cinematic. It's a coming of age story, and Ocean Vuong is, and I will forever say this, a master of language. His sentences, every word, he's truly a poet because every word within this book was so purposeful. It was used to further push greater metaphors and greater themes of life that he's hinting at. So if you're looking for a great story that details family life, the struggles of being a first-generational immigrant where your parents don't know the language of the country that you're in, story of love and queerness, definitely get into this one. And it is fiction, but I believe Ocean Vuong is in a way writing a letter to his own mother, who is Vietnamese, who cannot speak English. So definitely check out this book. I loved it so much. And if you haven't read Ocean Vuong yet, then what are you doing? Up next, I have another very hyped up book that I read as my second book in 2021. And that was Normal People by Sally Rooney. Now, don't come for me, guys, okay? Because I might say some controversial stuff about this book. But it was not my most favorite thing that I read, but I really liked it for specific reasons, and here are the reasons why. I loved this book. It follows Marianne and Connell, two very ordinary people who have their own things going on in their lives, and they just happen to fall in love, and you see how their relationship grows over time. Sally Rooney has a very dry way of writing that puts people off, and I will admit it put me off at first too. And this was a book that I was pretty harsh on in the beginning, but as I sat and thought about the story more, the more I realized that it may be better than what I first thought it was. The ending, this is not a spoiler, but I just felt like I wanted more. Like, I'm very dramatic, so I was like, ooh, I want like this big grand ending, but that's not what you get from Normal People, so I guess that was the point. But I really liked how she wrote like wokeness into Marianne and Connell. Like, they are both very well-read, brilliant people, and their commentary on society was what I really enjoyed out of the book, honestly. And there were so many books within here that I'm like, I have to read that just from what they were talking about. So if you are into romances that are kind of like slow burns but are very reflective of life and the tragedies that people go through, as well as if you enjoy commentary on social, political, and economic issues in countries and globally, definitely check this out. Coming in at the next book, I have The Terrible. So I'm not going to talk about this at all because I probably mentioned this book 10 times on my channel. It is probably one of my favorite memoirs from the poet Ursula de Ward. She has a poetry collection out, Bone. But basically, this is a lyrical memoir that details her life from childhood to adulthood. This book explores a lot of insecurities that women face over sexualization of the youth and the pressure that young girls face from a society that is built on masculinity and the male gaze, as well as finding yourself. Complicated family dynamics are evident, and what I really just love about this is that each chapter is so short. It's like its own little novella, and the language is very purposeful as well, so you get a big picture of Ursa's life at the time with as few words as possible, which, now that I think about it, is very millennial / Gen Z of me, because we like things short and sweet, you know? So that's probably why I like this book. Next, I have Animal Farm. I read Animal Farm this year, and I don't know, something was just calling me to read this. I read the back and I was like, okay, this sounds legit like what is happening in the US government right now, so maybe I should read some George Orwell about it. And I was not wrong. Very similar to what's going on. I rated this 5 out of 5. I think if there is an Orwellian book that you want to read, it should be Animal Farm. It is so short. He is, again, super concise. I have some annotations in here, and I just really loved Orwell dragging capitalism and totalitarianism in like about 200 pages, and I was here for it. So what you'll read in this book is just how basically people, in this case animals, manipulate and abuse their power to keep people insubordinate. But what's funny is that people think Orwell was against socialism. No, he's against capitalism. He was a democratic socialist. So, oh, and just another note, I saw this really funny tweet about how someone said Mean Girls is basically Animal Farm because Katie in Mean Girls, who's played by Lindsay Lohan, and her friends try to concoct a plan to take over the plastics and dethrone Regina George, but then Lindsay Lohan just ends up becoming like a worse Regina George, which is basically the plot of Animal Farm. So take that as you will. Okay, up next I have Writers and Lovers by Lily King, and this book was a 4 out of 5 for me. I really loved certain aspects of this book, and there were some aspects of it that weren't my favorite thing. But this book follows a 31-year-old woman on her journey of becoming an author. She is working full-time as a waitress. She's broke. She's in crippling debt. I mean, who can relate? Probably most of us. She talks about grief a lot, and it's written in such a poetic way. The language is flowery. There are just so many images from this book that are ingrained in my mind and that I think about constantly. So if you are an aspiring author and writer, and you also love reading stories about women who are depressed and who are going through a lot of things, but yet you can still find love and beauty in the tragedy, definitely check out Writers and Lovers. All right, so now we're getting into some poetry. Oh yeah. I didn't read any poetry in January, which is actually sick, okay? It's disgusting because I love poetry. That is my #1 girl. That's my #1 BFF. When it comes to literature, it's poetry. But I read Sweet Dark by Savannah Brown, and this was the first thing that I read in February. And basically, Sweet Dark is Savannah Brown's second poetry collection, and her musings within this collection are answering the big questions with the small moments that we experience in everyday human life. So she has like a very philosophical lens in this book, and she equates a lot of normal everyday routine functions and experiences and using that as a microscopic moment to then macroscopically reflect on the world and the universe and its inner workings. Once again, she had me with the first poem. She's talking about being terribly afraid of vastness, and it's like impending doom on us as humans. And I was just like, girl, I love this already. Oh my god. Okay, so the next book that I read it as the first book that I read on my Kindle, and let me tell you, was it a ride. And that book was The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And when I say I flew through this book, basically Evelyn Hugo is a Hollywood starlet who is telling her story of her rise to fame and the era right between the end of old Hollywood to new Hollywood. And she had 7 husbands, and she goes into detail about each relationship with each husband and what it meant to her. And this story was so good. If you like a Gossip Girl vibe, if you like drama, and if you like romance, it was just like very real, raw interpretation of like our human expression and what people do to get to where we want to be. It was fantastic, okay? And this is another book that has some LGBTQ representation going on, and I just have to stan Taylor Jenkins Reid. Like, I need to read more of her books. I have to. Like, there's no getting around it, okay? Okay. We got another fun one that is blowing up on the internet. I think everyone's reading it, especially for Black History Month, and that is The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. And honestly, this book wasn't my favorite. I think I might have rated it 4 stars, but I leaned more to 3.5 out of 5. And I have some bigger gripes with this book, but it could just have been me, honestly, because I wanted her to focus on certain aspects of this book that she didn't. But I digress. So basically, the story follows twin sisters Stella and Desiree, and they are from a town called Mallard, and everyone within this town is extremely fair Black people. Like, they have extremely light skin to the point that people in the town could pass for white. One of the twins decides to adopt a white entity and abandon her family and live a life of privilege as a white woman, which the premise is amazing. Like, I think that is such a cool story to tell, especially with twin sisters, where as one, on the other hand, fully embraces her Blackness and marries a darker skinned man, and she has a dark skinned child, which was frowned upon in her town. So it's interesting take on how people rebel against systems and the way that they choose to do so. I really like that. There's also LGBTQ representation in here as well. So that's what this book will give you. Like I said, my personal gripings could just be that I wanted her to focus and expand more on how passing for white really psychologically can affect someone. Like, I feel like it was just kind of glossed over, and this book is not plot driven at all. It is just pondering on the characters and their lives and how each of their decisions affected the generation following them. So if this sounds interesting to you, you should read it. So many people love it. It just wasn't my favorite thing, but I really enjoyed it still. Okay, so I read another book on my Kindle, and it was a poetry, and it was called 20 Love Poems in a Song of Despair by Pablo Neruda. And I really like this one. It's another collection that was beautiful and sad at the same time, and anytime there's a nature poet, I'm all for it. I love it. I want to read more of it. This was like a nice collection, you know? My friend Michelle recommended it to me, and it was just such a nice read, and my favorite ones were more towards the end, and yeah, get on that. It was really good. Well, up next, I read Exhalation by Ted Chiang, and this was a book club pick, and I really enjoyed this collection. It's a collection of short stories and like the sci-fi genre that explores technology and how it could possibly impact our human experience and how we live within the world. I talked about parrots. Oh my God, there was a story in there about parrots and how they are their own intelligence and how they look and view us as humans as thinking we're the center of the universe. And they're like, no, there are so many different creatures and we all have our own ways of life. And it was just speaking to the environmentalist in me, the budding environmentalist, because I'm not all the way there, but I'm getting there. And I just really loved it. I love concepts of memory, of being an unreliable narrator, because who can trust their own memory and story? If you read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. And there was one about prisms and multiple parallel universes, and how if we had access to those universes, how might it change how we viewed our own experience in this plane. So if you like all that, you have to read Exhalation. So finally, I'm just going to talk about some books that I'm going to read by the end of February. 50% done with the book I'm going to mention now, and that is Ta-Nehisi Coates' Between the World and Me. This is blowing my mind so far. It is definitely going to be a 5 out of 5 for me. I could feel it. You know, when you get that feeling in your gut when you're reading a 5 out of 5, and this one is doing it for me. He is talking about the preservation and survival of Black people through the Black body, and how the systems in America were created or implicitly perpetuate the violence on the Black body. And he's writing this as a letter to his 16-year-old son, who is witnessing the death of Trayvon Martin, the acquitment of the police officers who were involved with Michael Brown. So his perception and appreciation for Black art, Black literature, Black advancement, Black improvement, Black unity, Black beauty, I am loving it. And if you are looking for a book to read, not just for Black History Month, okay? You can read Black authors any month. Check this one out for sure. And the last book that I just want to mention is a poetry collection, and that is Finna by Nate Marshall. This one was in my books I want to read in 2021. I think I read a poem or two so far, but I'm definitely going to demolish this by the end of this weekend, which is the end of February. Can't say too much about it. I'm still, fresh in it. I just wanted to include those last two because I most definitely will finish them by the end of this month. So just thought you should know. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you have read any of the books that I mentioned and that I read, let me know what you thought of them. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at EKGWriting. I will also link my Goodreads account here so you can really have the inside scoop on what I'm reading, how I'm rating it, what I'm liking, what I'm not liking. Yeah, that's basically it. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.
I was like, yo.